So welcome to the first coaching session of the Sports Speed Insider. You would have seen from the overview, you've got some basic frameworks, you've got some knowledge, but again, I encourage you to buy the book to make sure that you can flick and pick in becoming the best speed geek to build some speed freaks. Today, what we're going to look through is actually just how we can implement the sports speed system across a training week. We're going to go through a couple of different variations, and I wanted to do a whiteboard session particularly for this because we can start to build, and I can scribble all over it and show you the ebbs and flows of what we're looking for from a training intensity perspective and a few other bits and pieces. So the main aim when looking at applying the sports speed system across a training week effectively is by understanding the density of training work, okay, and the application of the density of training work. What that means is we don't want to do too many sessions in a short space of time and then apply the wrong things in those sessions. So when we break it out, let's take an off-season example. Let's take something really simple that we don't have to consider team sport training and team sport preparation as a primary focus. The primary focus here is the development of general speed. So we're starting right at the basics of the sports speed system, but we're really going to start ramping as the weeks go on in this coaching program to help you really start applying things. So when we've got a typical 7-day week, one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of coaches make, if we're taking off season, we try to consider all the training on a typical 7-day turnaround. Now, we don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. Yes, there are some logistical things, people like to do certain things on a Sunday or whatever, but in the grand scheme of things, if you identify the 3 or 4 key training days that you can create in a week, you can then rotate your workouts within that and not trying to cram all of your training in a 7-day period. Because remember, if we're developing speed, we need to maximize freshness at all times and relative freshness. So what I mean by relative freshness is the cost of fatigue that we're willing to incur in a training cycle against the actual improvement that we're going to make. So you may have come into consideration with this where you've done a load of training, or your athletes have done a load of training, but they've not got better because the fatigue cost has outweighed the need for the adaptation. So what we've got is a negative transfer, we've got a negative bias. So our job is to completely turn that on its head. So when we look at across a 7-day, all right, remember some of our high intensity work will take 72 hours to reload and regenerate from. So if we identify our first training session on day 1, then we're not really able to do anything till day 4 and then day 7. So there'll be our 3 main loading days. But then when we come across again, we've still got to wait another 2 days off of day 7. So that's going to take us to day 9, okay, for the 2 days in between. So then day 10, okay, and then day 11, day 13. All right, so we're going to get 5 big speed sessions across a 14-day period. Now you're thinking, well, they're only doing 5 sessions across 14 days, which will actually give us about, obviously we double it across a 28-day cycle of 4 weeks. So we're going to get 10 loading sessions over that period, maintaining that ratio that we've previously established. But also, let's not forget that after 2 workouts, we're still carrying the fatigue because we won't be completely recovered into the 3rd workout. And then from the 3rd workout, we're still carrying the fatigue into the 4th and into the 5th. So everything is declining, which then gives us some really good options and opportunities here to load in conjunction. Now there's a specific reason why in the first cycle I've loaded afterwards, the first sort of 7-day period. I've created supporting training afterwards, and then in the next wave of loading, I've created potentiation cycling. Okay, now this is where the nuance, and this is the insider stuff that not a lot of people will be willing to share and divulge and talk about. So in here, let's run the week. So fresh in off season, here I'm going to start with my max speed. Okay, I'm going to start with my max speed work because it's the furthest away from preparation and the highest level of stimulus that we can create. So we're going to be hitting max speed from day one. All right, and we slowly sandwich acceleration. Unlike track and field, where a lot of the time that they'll hit max speed on a Thursday, acceleration on a Tuesday, or a Monday, Wednesday, vice versa, we're doing it in the opposite. So here we're going to hit acceleration focused, okay? Then here, off season, again, we're going to hit our change of direction. So our three main pillars of speed and sprint and sport speed are going to be maximum speed, acceleration, and change of direction. All right, so linear versus non-linear. Now in these workouts, these O's that I've created here, what we do, right, if you had all the time in the world, and when I've worked extensively with professionals one-to-one in off-season, NFL for example, what we would do is we would do our max speed workout and then we'd do our supplementary lower body weights and our general conditioning thereafter. But sometimes you don't have that. So what we do is we split that day across two. So again, field sports, we're going to need some upper body in there, so it's not completely conditioned to just a single lower body hit. So what we will do is we will specifically target the general force qualities here that maximum speed needs on the following day in a condensed version, and we can run this against time. So here you could get a 75-minute session there, and I would want no more than 40-45 minutes there. Okay, so then we're combining that for about a two and a bit hour block over 2 days. So we train about 2 hours across the 2 days, 2.5 hours. Then here, let's do a pound sign. This is where we optimize recovery. We have to optimize recovery here. Then we start our acceleration following that 75, okay, and then 45. And then here we will support the weight training stack that we need and the ballistics. But here in this first session, we're focusing purely on acceleration, and then change of direction. By the time we've got to day 7, you're probably on day 8, you probably don't want to do a weight training session. So this pound sign here is a really important recovery opportunity and recovery loading session before we then hit max speed there and accel here, and then we roll the wave into what would be our change of direction. Sorry, our max speed on the X here, and then here what we would do is we would do a reduced volume training session to support that. So because we're carrying fatigue, we want to extend the window of recovery in this off-season period. Okay, so you would take that weight session here and you would do it there, still on the same day, but what you would do is you would take a third. Okay, you would take a third of the weights volumes off, okay, and then you would set that up to help extend recovery, refresh the system, load up the system to then run fast the following day. And then we apply the same principle. So we pound sign and recover, money in the bank, all right, and then we do exactly the same thing. We take our reduced volume lower body and then work into there, and we'll run that cycle through continuously for a block of 28 days. So within that time you get good quality work, and in that, remember, if we're taking an off-season example, the goal of off-season is to develop recoverable abilities and maximize the opportunities that we've got to improve training. So that's your first lesson, and this is the level of detail that we're going to be going into inside the Sports Speed Insider. And stay tuned for next week, because we're going to start to apply the learn, load, execute model in how we actually build acceleration. So stay tuned for that, and make sure that you have a little pick and flick through the book and script it all out. For now, I'm Sam, and I'll see you on the next call.